Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Hello, preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
You may be wondering why this won't be our average episode.
Yeah.
From the title
Sure
of this episode.
Yeah.
But actually, it's going to feel familiar. We're just here to talk about whether average is a real thing.
I know. Yeah. So, your typical episode, but about averages.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's a book that was published, I believe, in 2016, and I want to shout it out. The name of the book is The End of Average, and the subtitle is How We Succeed in a World That Values Sameness. It's written by Todd Rose, who also, by the way, has many videos on YouTube. You can find Todd Rose on YouTube. The video that Alison and I watched before thinking about this episode was called The End of Average, Todd Rose's 8 for 8. Again,
it's an amazing video.
accessible
Go
on YouTube.
watch it. Yeah.
Please go watch it, and
Go
maybe
watch
I'll
it.
link it. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
link it on our website.
Yeah.
By the time you listen to this, it should be linked there. So Todd Rose talks about the fact that average isn't real, that there's no such thing as the average brain, the average student, the average human, the average action, the average way to learn. There's no such thing as average. And they have studies that show this. And if you go to our website, howpreschoolteachersdoit.com, look in the listener resources, log in, look in the listener resources, you can find the video where there's like this graphic of how they've proven that no two brains operate the same way.
Yeah.
Right.
So, doesn't that lead you to question, why are we treating all these brains the same if they're not the same?
I think one of the ways that we treat these brains in the same way in early education is that all the tools that we use, the tools that talk about what's the best way to set up environments, how do we assess the children's development and learning, what are the milestones for children at certain ages and stages, they're all based on averages, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
think you hit one that kind of, the assessment one. You're assessing a lot of these children, all of these children, based on this average when they are not at all average. So that's troubling to me. I don't know.
And I think, and there are different ways to measure that average. I am by no means a mathematician or statistician. I'm not that person.
Yeah.
I think, though, when we think about how are we going to do things in our early childhood settings, how are we going to parent young children, what's the best way? There's so much that we base on averages when we're all so much more, maybe even more individual than we even realized. So I think that speaks to what the National Association for the Education of Young Children says in their statements having to do with developmentally appropriate practice, the ethical conduct and statement of commitment. Those statements all talk about, valuing each child as a unique individual.
Yeah.
And doing things in a way that is individualized based on the needs of young children. And how do you do that? Again, how do you do that when you're in a room with 15 young children? How do you not aim for what you perceive as average?
Yeah.
If you look at Todd Rose's work, it is a little mind-blowing when you think about how our educational systems function as a whole. And in early childhood, we talk all the time about individualizing, the value of one-to-one interactions with these young children, the value of small groups. Small group is way more valuable a period of time than a large group gathering.
Yep.
And yet I still consistently see people saying, oh, large group is the most important time and they have to sit for XYZ time because that's on average what the
Right,
young child
because-
of this age can sit for, and that whole thing.
Yeah, which to me is just crazy. But they only say that it's important because when they move up to, say, the next grade, kindergarten, they are sitting for even longer. So you're like, well, we got to prepare them. We got to prepare them for this average kindergarten. And that's
it's
not the
sometimes
way
not even
kindergarten should be
kindergarten.
either. Shouldn't be that way in kindergarten. Yeah.
It should not be, but it's also not always kindergarten. I see people saying that about 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds.
Yeah,
They're not going to
that's
kindergarten the
ridiculous.
next year. But even so, if and we've probably said this before in past episodes, especially the ones that talk about circle time or large group time. Just because a child can't sit like that when they're 3 or 4 years old doesn't mean they won't do it when they're 8, 9, and 10.
Right, right.
They
Or it might
mature.
just mean that they might not be the type that will ever sit, but they're still learning even though they're moving.
They are.
You know, so
they're still learning. Some children need to move, though in a future episode we plan to talk about if in fact there are learning styles. We're going to just keep debunking the way that early education and all education is set up.
Remember when we used to do episodes about myth busting? That's what I feel like
This
we're back into here, and I like those episodes. Those are old ones. If you haven't watched, I don't even know if we were on YouTube back then, but go check those out. Those are really good too. But that's what we're into here. We're debunking.
If there is no average, what do I do with that information? What I do with that information is I have to build actually more, I think, more very small groups.
Small groups.
Me with, I often tell people small group time. You sit at a table with like 4 children, 5 children. Maybe that's not small enough.
Maybe not. Maybe you need 2.
Maybe it's us with 1 or 2 children.
1 or 2 children, yeah.
And teaching them each in the way that their individual brains function and in the way that they learn, right? Yeah. Which means that in the typical early childhood day, things have to change.
Yes.
They have to have outdoor time, and I frankly don't think that they have enough outdoor time in the typical preschool schedule.
Absolutely don't. I don't think anybody does. Go all the way up to 5th grade, they don't get enough outdoor or even just free recess time.
So we have to leave outdoor time and expand it if possible. Mm-hmm. Children need to be read to. All the studies show at least 30 minutes a day in order to help them to develop literacy skills that will serve them well in the future. And there's also information that came out of the Institute for Early Education Research, the National Institute for Early Education Research. I was on a call where the person who runs that, Steve Barnett, was talking about the studies they're doing now. And Dr. Barnett showed us statistics that children, because of the pandemic, are being read to less time than they were in the past. There are still fewer less time. And there are still fewer children in early childhood programs than there were before March of 2020. So there's this long-term effect. And maybe we'll dig into a little bit of that. Children are being read to less now. So we have to do our read alouds. Maybe that's in small groups rather than a large group. So that takes time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We have to do maybe more small groups or more small group time than we have done in the past if we're going to acknowledge the individuality, the true individuality of children. We have to have lunch. Can't take that out.
Yeah.
Large group can be really short. Large group can be we sing a song together to remind everyone we're part of a class, and then we go about our day. We don't spend a lot of time. What if we don't spend a lot of time together? It's not the most valuable time. It's based on these averages. And it's also based a lot on memorization and other things that don't matter as much as application.
An old view of what teaching used to be. And we know that is not the best use of our time. So why we continue to still have these longer, large group times, I don't know, because we know better now.
We know better now. And if you're more curious about that we have episodes in this podcast. Scroll back among our episodes. We have episodes about this. So what other times of day take place? What did I miss, Allison?
In some settings, nap, depending on the age.
Right. There can be rest that has to take place.
Rest time, snack time. outdoor,
Snack
did you
time
say
has to
outdoor
take
time?
place.
Snack time,
Hmm.
outdoor time.
So where are we finding the time to actually really individualize working with young children?
Right.
I
Right.
think is the
Especially when
ultimate question.
some class sizes get bigger, as more students enroll in programs. Like right now, like we had mentioned, I think there's less students in
Right.
early childhood
There
programs
are.
since the pandemic,
There
but I
are.
think eventually that might get back to what we were. So you're going to have a large class of students. How do you get to all of those students in one day?
How do I do this with all the students? And
Yeah.
do we do it in one day? Maybe that's the
Maybe
question.
we don't. Maybe it needs to be over a week.
Right. So on the
Do it
classroom
over a week.
schedules, if you were to look at your classroom schedule,
Yeah.
and let's say instead of spending small group activities in early childhood, particularly in like pre-K and lower, shouldn't be longer than about 10 minutes or so.
Mhm.
That's their attention span usually. Again, there's no average. So there will be
Right.
some children who can sit longer and some children who
Some
can
who
sit less time, and
last
that's
time.
fine.
Yeah.
But so let's say you're planning for like a 10-minute activity, and maybe instead of sitting with 5 children for 10 minutes,
You sit with two.
2 for, but then how do we get to, this is I don't know if we have a
I
solution.
think I think the way to do it maybe is like, because in so many settings, I think most of them, all the lesson plans are individual days. Like on Monday, we're all going to do this, and on Tuesday, we're all going to do that. And instead, maybe we need to be like, no, here's the plan for the whole week. All the students will get these activities over the course of a week, instead of it being like individual days where you feel like everything is crammed and all the students have to get that all in one day. Say, over a week, here's what we plan on doing. These are the goals or whatever. This is the plan. We'll tailor these plans based on individual student needs, and then but do it over the course of a week.
So
But I don't know if a lot of people are used to doing things like that. That'd be a big change, but I think a doable change.
if we're saying that there's an issue with average and we need to spend more time with individual students, then what you're saying is don't plan the way we've always planned.
Yes, you need to change the way you plan.
So
And it's a
instead of,
week long.
okay, but you know what I really like about this? We're
Yeah,
always saying it's not about the task, it's about the goal.
the
So
goal.
suppose this week, instead of picking out, we're all going to do this task,
Yeah.
instead we say, we're all going to work on these goals.
Yes.
And
And
so throughout the week, I'm going to work with individual children
yes.
to help them based on who they are, where they are, and how they learn, and what their experience is and understandings, to work toward this goal, to pique their interest in things that would lead them, give them a little
Right.
more independent time to work while you're
Yes.
working more individually with other children, and just
Yeah.
sort of say, okay, this week, here's our goals, which is what we should be doing anyway.
Which is
This
what we
week,
should be doing.
here are
Yeah.
our goals, everybody, adults in the room. These are our goals. Now go forth and work
Right.
with children in groups of 1 or 2 to work on these goals however we think each child will do it best. So here's an example. I, as a student, was better at certain tasks than others, but through any task, you can learn anything. We've also
Yeah.
talked about that in prior episode, that all learning is connected. So I struggled more, let's say, with math. And there's some mathematical thing or concept that they want me to learn. So for me, they're going to have to focus it on something else and sort of
Mhm.
sweep the math into it.
Sweep it. Yep.
So
Sweep it
they
in
could
there.
focus it more on, I loved dramatic play, I loved reading, I loved playing with, when I was a young girl, I loved playing with dolls, I loved playing in dramatic play areas, to say, okay, we need to get this math concept across to Cindy. She doesn't learn math like everybody else, so we're going to go over to the dramatic play area and embed math over there for Cindy. and encourage her to do something with it. Then we're going to move on to Allison, who has a more scientifically based brain.
True.
Right? And in
Yeah.
order for Allison to learn this topic, we're going to give her a science experiment to do, or something to do with animals.
Animals.
Yep. Because Allison loves animals.
Cindy knows me so well.
Something to do with animals that will encourage Allison to learn this curricular
Math
concept or goal.
Yes.
I love the fact that this conversation has led us to either walking even further away from what's the task from it for everybody, because it's not about the task. So you're right. We need to maybe inspire individually. You know what this sort of reminds me of? I could be a little off here, but this is what I'm thinking of. It's sort of reminding me of Montessori, the Montessori method.
Yeah.
Where each child makes decisions about what they're going to do and use.
Yeah.
And teachers are facilitators.
Yeah.
They go in there and they help to build knowledge, and then they go back out and the children keep exploring what they want to explore. But a lot of the materials, if you're in a true Montessori setting, a lot of the materials are very mathematically based and scientifically based. But they get to decide. The children decide. Here's what I'm going to use. And then it's the facilitator or the teacher's job to figure out how to get the concepts kind of in there. I think we started this episode with what are we going to do about this, but I really love this approach to teaching. Yes. I love it, Allison. Thank you.
Yeah.
But then I think that leads to the larger question of what about assessment, which are based on they're based on what is widely done by children. Wouldn't that be like an average?
Yeah. I mean, could we... Yeah, I feel like no matter what you do, it's kind of based on the average. But could we like kind of assess where each individual child is at any point? Like this, say Johnny knows how to count from 1 to 10 using one-to-one correspondence. Sally can count from 1 to 20. And then now you have your baseline for each student. So and then next month when you evaluate again, you'd be like, oh, wow, Johnny improved. Now he can count to 12 and Sally can count to 30. Could we do something like that?
So that it's based more on the individual child's progress. Not progress as compared to an average.
Other kids. So you're not going to say Johnny's behind Sally because Sally can do to 30. It's like, no, here's where Johnny is. He's counting to 10. Now, next time I evaluate, is he getting higher in his numbers? If he's not, then I know I got to work on that with Johnny. You know what I mean? Like maybe something more like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like for Cindy, for example.
Yeah.
Cindy will never, ever, ever be able to do some mathematical thinking. Have I improved over the many years of dealing with math? Yes, I have. Am I the same as maybe Allison? No, I am not. And I'm probably not the average, and I'm really grateful for things that they told us we wouldn't be able to use, but we can, like calculators and those sorts of things, and computers. When I was a student, they were like, you can't depend on that, Cindy. You have to learn this math.
And now it's in my back pocket all the time. I love that. Like, you're not going to have a calculator with you all the time. It's like, really?
Yes, I
am. I do.
Great seers of the future that they were.
Yeah.
So, what is good work for me in that area is different than what is great work for somebody else, but I have improved. And what do these comparisons do, by the way? Some of these comparisons are damaging.
Yeah. Wouldn't you rather go into like a parent-teacher conference and be like, oh, Cindy has improved over the last 3 months in her mathematical skills. Here's where we first have her baseline and here's where she is now. Instead of being like, well, according to the average, Cindy's not meeting the average. Wouldn't you rather hear like all the progress that your child has made, even if it doesn't match up to this average thing? Like he still has progressed, and they're still learning. Like, wouldn't that feel like a more positive experience?
So preschool peeps, what do we do with this information? And people raising children, what do we do? What do we do is we figure this out, that each child, and we've said it, but I think that what is talked about in this work having to do with the fact that there is no average, if you're really going to admit that, and if you're really going to acknowledge it, and if you have a hard time wrapping your head around it, again, go to our website and watch the video.
Video's great.
In the listener resources. So if we're really going to say, okay, this is the truth, then we have to change our way of individualizing. We haven't been individualizing with enough focus or the way that the children really need us to, according to this research. Education is always evolving, right? I'm always telling people it's a living thing. We're always getting new information about how to educate people, what helps people to become educated. We're always learning more about that. And yet this man's book came out in 2016 and there's been so little movement around it, I think.
Yeah, I know. But at least like if you are a teacher and you do change your ways, you know, you can at least like say, hey, no, I read this book or I watched this video and this research has been out for a long time and I'm going to try this for a couple months and see where it goes, you know? And then, because once parents hear that, or sometimes administrators, when they hear that, they're like, oh, okay, there's research about it. Okay. You know, like.
But even as a parent, if someone said to me, you know, I don't believe in comparing your child to other children. We're going to take your child right where your child is and work on progress in these goals.
Yeah.
That would make me so happy as a parent.
So happy. Yeah.
You see my child and what my child needs. You see that my child is an individual. You see that my child needs to be taught in the way that my child needs to be taught. This would make me so happy. We just have to be willing to have these conversations with people that could challenge how they viewed education.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, my peeps. I challenge you to go and watch that video. And to look into this, you can Google it. You can Google Todd Rose average and see everything that comes up.
Yeah.
And thank you to Todd Rose for putting this information out in the world and helping us to think about it. I hope everybody ponders this after this episode. But before we end the episode, you know we've been shouting out different places that are listening to us. And this week across in the world, in the larger world, in our top 5 is Turkey. Turkey, mostly in Istanbul.
Yeah.
Hi Istanbul.
Turkey.
Yeah. And in the United States, if we're going to look across the United States, the number 1 state in the last 7 days, North Carolina.
North Carolina.
With, interestingly, the majority of people coming from the same region, and I don't remember it off the top of my head now, but it's also an area I've not heard of. So it didn't stick. I'm sorry.
You.
But North Carolina as a whole, thank you. If your state fell out of our shout out or hasn't been in our shout out, you need to go around telling people.
Tell people
to find how preschool teachers do it and how preschoolteachersdoit.com and check us out and find us on Facebook and let us know how this episode may have jarred your thinking about how to work with the children.
Yeah.
We look forward to learning from you what you've done with this, preschool peeps.
Yeah.
We'll catch you next time.
Bye, peeps.
Bye, peeps.